Captain Adam Wilson had logged over 15,000 flight hours without incident. He was known for his precision, his calm under pressure. So when his aircraft disappeared from radar on a clear October morning in 2021, nobody could explain it. Before we begin, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more stories like this one. 3 years of searching turned up nothing, until a fisherman's net pulls up something from the ocean floor that makes investigators question everything they thought they knew. The alarm clock buzzed at 4:30 a.m. on October 23, 2021. But Captain Adam Wilson was already awake. He'd been staring at the ceiling for the past 20 minutes, his mind running through the pre-flight checklist he'd performed thousands of times before. At 42 years old, Adam had earned a reputation as one of the most reliable pilots in the Pacific Northwest. His colleagues at Cascade Air Freight called him the Machine, not because he was cold or robotic, but because he was utterly dependable, precise to the second. But something felt different this morning. Adam rolled out of bed quietly, careful not to wake his wife Sarah. Their bedroom in suburban Portland was dark and peaceful, family photos barely visible in the pre-dawn gloom. He padded to the kitchen, started the coffee maker, and pulled up the weather reports on his tablet. Clear skies, light winds, perfect flying conditions for his run to Bozeman, Montana. So why did his stomach feel like it was tied in knots? You're up early, even for you. Sarah's sleepy voice came from behind him. She was wearing one of his old flannel shirts, her dark hair tousled. Same time as always, Adam replied, forcing a smile. Just a quick cargo run. Should be back by dinner. Sarah studied his face with the knowing look of a woman who'd been married to a pilot for 15 years. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Just... Adam paused, unsure how to explain the unease that had been building since yesterday. Probably just tired. But it wasn't tiredness. 3 days earlier, Adam had received an unusual call from his dispatcher, a last-minute cargo addition, a sealed metal case that required special handling. No details about what was inside, just specific instructions: maintain cabin pressure, avoid turbulence, delivered directly to a man named Vincent Harley at the Bozeman airstrip. The case itself wasn't large, about the size of a briefcase, but it was surprisingly heavy. When Adam had asked about the contents, his dispatcher had simply said, "Medical equipment, very sensitive. The client is paying triple our usual rate for expedited, careful delivery." Triple rate meant Adam didn't ask any more questions. Now, driving through the empty Portland streets toward the airport, Adam couldn't shake the feeling that he should have asked more questions. A lot more questions. The Cascade Air Freight hangar was buzzing with early morning activity when Adam arrived at 5:45 a.m. Mechanics were performing final checks on aircraft, ground crews were loading cargo, and the familiar smell of aviation fuel and coffee filled the air. Adam had been working out of this hangar for 8 years, and the routine usually calmed his nerves. Today, it didn't. "Morning, Captain Wilson," called out Jenny Martinez, the head of ground operations. She was walking toward him with a clipboard and an expression that immediately put Adam on alert. "Don't tell me there's a problem with the aircraft," Adam said, accepting the paperwork. "No, the Cessna's in perfect condition, but we've got some irregularities with your cargo manifest." Adam's stomach tightened. "What kind of irregularities?" Jenny glanced around, then lowered her voice. "That special delivery case, the one going to Bozeman. I've never seen anything like it. The paperwork is minimal, just a tracking number and delivery instructions. No declared contents, no shipper information beyond a P.O. box in Seattle." "That's not standard protocol," Adam said slowly. "No, it's not. But the payment cleared and management approved it." Jenny hesitated. "There's something else. The case has some kind of electronic device attached to it, not a standard GPS tracker. Something more sophisticated. And it's been making a very faint humming sound." Adam felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Humming? Like electronics warming up. Tom in maintenance wanted to open it and check, but the delivery instructions specifically state that breaking the seal voids the contract and makes us liable for, I quote, "catastrophic damages in excess of $10 million. $10 million. A briefcase-sized container of medical equipment. Where's the case now?" Adam asked. "Already loaded in your cargo bay. Secured according to the special instructions." Jenny handed him a second sheet of paper. These are the in-flight protocols, very specific about altitude, cabin pressure, and, she frowned, about radio communications. Adam scanned the document. Most of it was standard cargo handling procedures, but the final paragraph made his blood run cold. Pilot is instructed to maintain radio silence during the final 30 minutes of flight approach. Any deviation from approved flight path or unauthorized communication will result in immediate contract termination and legal action. This doesn't make sense, Adam muttered. Radio silence during approach? That violates basic safety protocols. I thought the same thing, Jenny said. But legal reviewed it and said the contract language gives them the right to make special requests, as long as they don't explicitly violate FAA regulations. And technically, radio silence isn't illegal if there's no emergency. Adam studied the paperwork more carefully. The delivery contact, Vincent Harley, had provided a cell phone number, but no company information. The pickup location for the case was listed as Industrial District, Seattle, with no specific address. Everything about this job screamed that something was off, but the payment was real. $36,000 for a 4-hour round trip. More than Adam usually made in 2 months. Captain? Jenny was watching him carefully. If you're not comfortable with this run, I can try to reach management. Maybe we can… No, Adam said, making a decision he would later regret. It's fine. Probably just some rich client who values privacy. Wouldn't be the first time we've handled unusual requests. 20 minutes later, Adam was in the cockpit of the Cessna 404, running through his pre-flight checklist. Everything appeared normal. The aircraft had been recently serviced, fuel tanks were topped off, and the weather forecast remained perfect. But as he prepared to start the engines, Adam made a decision that would save his life. He activated his personal flight recorder. Adam had purchased the small digital device 2 years earlier after a close call with severe turbulence that hadn't been properly documented by the aircraft's standard systems. The personal recorder captured cockpit audio, basic flight data, and GPS coordinates. Essentially, a backup black box that uploaded data to a cloud server every 30 minutes when in range of cell towers. It was completely against company policy, and Adam had never told anyone about it. As the Cessna's engines came to life, Adam keyed his radio for departure clearance. Portland ground, Cascade 77 Alpha, requesting taxi for departure. Cascade 77 Alpha, taxi to runway 28 left via taxiway Alpha. Normal. Everything was completely normal. But as Adam taxied toward the runway, he couldn't stop thinking about the humming case in his cargo bay and the radio silence he'd be required to maintain in less than 4 hours. He had no idea that he would never make that delivery. At 7:23 a.m., Cascade 77 Alpha lifted off from Portland International Airport into crystal clear skies. Adam felt some of his tension ease as the aircraft climbed through 3,000 feet. Flying had always been his sanctuary. Up here, surrounded by instruments he understood, and sky he could read like a book, the world made sense. The first 2 hours of the flight were routine. Adam maintained his assigned altitude of 9,500 feet, following the approved flight path northeast toward Montana. The Cessna hummed along smoothly, and Portland approach handed him off to Seattle Center, then to Spokane, exactly as planned. But as he passed over the Columbia River Gorge, Adam noticed something that made him frown. The GPS display showed a small but persistent discrepancy between his programmed flight path and his actual position. He was drifting slightly south, despite the fact that his heading and navigation instruments all indicated he was on course. Adam made a minor correction, but 10 minutes later, the drift had returned. And it was getting worse. He checked his compass, his GPS, and his navigation radios. Everything appeared to be functioning normally, but the aircraft kept wanting to pull to the south, as if something was influencing his navigation systems. That's when Adam remembered the humming case. Son of a bitch, he muttered, reaching for his flight bag. Inside was a small handheld GPS unit, a backup navigation device that operated independently of the aircraft's main systems. When he powered it on, his suspicions were confirmed. According to the handheld GPS, his actual position was nearly 2 miles south of where the aircraft's navigation system claimed he was. Someone had tampered with his instruments, creating a false reading that was gradually pulling him off course. but pulling him toward what? Adam's mind raced as he considered his options. He could declare an emergency and request vectors back to his approved flight path. He could turn around and return to Portland. Or he could continue on course and see where someone wanted him to go. The professional pilot in him said to turn around immediately. The part of him that had always been too curious for his own good whispered that he needed to understand what was happening. As he wrestled with the decision, his radio crackled to life. Cascade 77 Alpha. This is Seattle Center. We show you slightly off your filed flight plan. Please confirm your position. Adam looked at his instruments, then at his handheld GPS. If he reported his true position based on the independent GPS, air traffic control would know something was wrong with his aircraft. If he reported the position shown on his compromised instruments, he'd be lying to ATC. A serious violation that could cost him his license. Seattle Center Cascade 77 Alpha, Adam said carefully. I'm showing some minor navigation discrepancies. Request permission to troubleshoot and adjust course. Cascade 77 Alpha, approved. Report when back on course. Adam used the next 20 minutes to study the discrepancy more carefully. The false navigation signal was sophisticated, not a simple jamming device, but something that was feeding incorrect data to his GPS receiver while leaving all other systems apparently normal. This wasn't the work of some amateur. Someone with serious technical knowledge and expensive equipment was manipulating his flight. But why? The answer came at 9:47 a.m. when Adam noticed a new blip on his radar display. Another aircraft was approaching from the south, flying a course that would intercept his position in approximately 15 minutes. The radar signature was small, probably another single or twin-engine aircraft, but it was climbing rapidly and moving fast. Adam keyed his radio. Seattle Center, Cascade 77 Alpha. I'm showing traffic at my 11 o'clock, approximately 20 miles, climbing through 7,000 feet. Do you have that aircraft on radar? The response took longer than usual. Cascade 77 Alpha, we're not showing any traffic in your vicinity. Please confirm your position and the traffic location. Adam double-checked his radar display. The other aircraft was now 12 miles away and still closing. Seattle Center, traffic is now 12 miles, still climbing. I have a clear radar contact. Cascade 77 Alpha, we have no traffic on our scope. Are you certain of your radar indication? Something cold settled in Adam's stomach. Either Seattle Center's radar was malfunctioning, or the approaching aircraft was flying without a transponder, which meant it didn't want to be detected by air traffic control. Adam made a decision that would save his life for the second time that day. He reached into his flight bag and activated a small emergency locator beacon. Not the aircraft's official ELT, but a personal device he'd carried since his military flying days. The beacon would transmit his exact location to search and rescue satellites, regardless of what happened to his aircraft's normal radio equipment. 8 minutes later, the other aircraft came into visual range. Adam's blood ran cold when he saw it. The approaching plane was a military-style jet, painted in matte black with no visible markings. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen in civilian airspace, sleek, angular, and clearly built for speed and stealth, rather than cargo hauling. As the black aircraft pulled alongside his Cessna, Adam could see the pilot in the cockpit. The figure was wearing a flight suit and helmet that completely obscured their face, but they were clearly gesturing for Adam to follow them. Adam keyed his radio on the emergency frequency. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Cascade 77 Alpha, I am being intercepted by an unidentified military aircraft. My position is... His transmission was cut short by a burst of static so intense it made his headset squeal. When the static cleared, all of his radio equipment was dead. The black aircraft had jammed his communication. Adam looked to his left and saw the mysterious pilot pointing downward toward a remote valley in the Cascade Mountains. The message was clear. Land, or we'll make you land. But Adam Wilson hadn't survived 18 years of flying, including 2 tours in Afghanistan, by doing what strangers with military aircraft told him to do. Instead, he did something that would change everything. He reached for his personal flight recorder and began to narrate exactly what was happening. This is Captain Adam Wilson, October 23rd, 2021, 10:15 a.m. Adam spoke into his personal recorder. while keeping his eyes on the black aircraft. I'm being forced down by an unidentified military jet. All radio communications have been jammed. I'm approximately 40 miles northeast of Mount Hood, and I think this is connected to the cargo I'm carrying. The pilot of the black aircraft was becoming more insistent, pointing repeatedly toward a small valley that appeared to contain some kind of landing strip. Adam could see buildings and vehicles on the ground, clearly a prepared facility, not some random emergency landing site. Adam made a split-second decision that would determine whether he lived or died. Instead of following the black aircraft down, he pushed his throttles to maximum power and dove toward the deck, using the Cessna's smaller size and maneuverability to his advantage. The twin-engine cargo plane wasn't built for evasive maneuvers, but Adam had learned a few tricks during his military service. The black jet was faster, but Adam was flying through familiar territory. These mountains, these valleys, he'd flown this route hundreds of times and knew every ridge, every canyon, every place where a smaller aircraft could hide. Behind him, the military jet banked hard to follow, but Adam was already diving into a narrow canyon between two peaks. The canyon was barely wide enough for his Cessna, and definitely too narrow for the larger jet to follow safely. For a moment, Adam thought he might have escaped. Then his aircraft shuddered, and warning lights began flashing across his instrument panel. Engine temperature rising on the left engine, Adam narrated into his recorder, his voice tight with concentration. Oil pressure dropping. They've done something to my aircraft. Probably some kind of electromagnetic pulse or directed energy weapon. The left engine was overheating rapidly, far faster than any normal mechanical failure. Whatever had hit his aircraft was designed to cause catastrophic damage while leaving no obvious evidence of attack. Adam shut down the failing engine and feathered the propeller, but the Cessna was now flying on single-engine power with a full load of cargo. He was losing altitude steadily, and the nearest airport was more than 60 miles away. That's when he saw them. 2 more black aircraft had appeared ahead of him, rising from concealed positions in the valleys below. They had been waiting for him, positioned to cut off any escape route. This wasn't a random intercept. It was a carefully planned operation. 3 hostile aircraft now. Adam spoke into his recorder. This was planned. They knew my route, my timing, everything. Someone inside Cascade Air Freight is working with these people. The 2 aircraft ahead were smaller than the first jet. They looked like modified civilian planes, but with unusual antennas and equipment pods attached to their wings. As they closed in on Adam's position, his remaining engine began to stutter. They were killing his aircraft piece by piece. Adam had perhaps 2 minutes of flying time left before he'd be forced to crash land wherever he could find open ground. But instead of panic, a cold fury was building in his chest. He'd been set up, manipulated, and led into a trap. The cargo in his bay, whatever it really was, had been used as bait. But if someone wanted that cargo badly enough to orchestrate this elaborate operation, Adam was going to make sure they didn't get it. He looked down at the rugged mountain terrain below, calculating angles and distances. There, a steep-sided ravine with a small stream at the bottom. If he could get the aircraft into that ravine, the cargo would be destroyed on impact, and it would take days or weeks for anyone to recover anything useful from the wreckage. I'm going to attempt a controlled crash, Adam said into his recorder. If anyone finds this recording, tell my wife Sarah that I love her, and tell the FAA that Cascade Air Freight has been compromised. The cargo I'm carrying isn't medical equipment. I don't know what it is, but people are willing to kill for it. Adam pushed the nose down into a steep dive toward the ravine. Behind him, the 3 black aircraft followed, but they couldn't fire weapons without risking the destruction of whatever they were trying to capture. At 500 feet above the ravine, Adam's remaining engine died completely. The Cessna became a glider, dropping toward the rocky bottom of the canyon with barely controllable descent rate. Adam had one chance to get this right. Too steep and he'd be killed on impact, too shallow and he'd hit the canyon wall before reaching the bottom. He was 50 feet from impact when he made his final recording. The cargo is in a sealed metal case, approximately 2 feet by 1 foot by 6 inches. It's been making electronic noises and has some kind of sophisticated tracking device. Tell Sarah The recording ended in a crash of metal and static. Sarah Wilson knew something was wrong the moment her husband's flight became overdue. Adam had never, not once in 18 years of flying, failed to arrive within 30 minutes of his scheduled time without calling first. When 6:30 p.m. came and went with no word from Cascade Air Freight, Sarah began making phone calls. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Wilson," said the evening dispatcher at Cascade Air Freight. "Captain Wilson's aircraft lost radio contact approximately 4 hours ago. We've notified the FAA and the Civil Air Patrol. Search and rescue operations will begin at first light tomorrow." 4 hours. Adam had been missing for 4 hours, and this was the first she was hearing about it. "What do you mean, lost radio?" "Contact?" Sarah demanded. "What was his last known position?" "Ma'am, I don't have those details. I can have the operations manager call you first thing in the morning." Sarah slammed down the phone and immediately dialed 911. Within an hour, her living room was filled with officials from multiple agencies: the FAA, the Civil Air Patrol, the Oregon State Police, and even a representative from the National Transportation Safety Board. "Mrs. Wilson," said FAA Inspector Janet Crawford, "your husband was flying a routine cargo run to Bozeman, Montana. His last radio contact was with Seattle Center at approximately 9:45 a.m. when he reported minor navigation issues. He failed to check in with Spokane approach as scheduled at 10:30 a.m. Navigation issues? Sarah felt her stomach clench. Adam doesn't have navigation issues. He could fly that route in his sleep. "We understand your concern," said Major Thompson from the Civil Air Patrol. "We're launching a full search at dawn. We have the aircraft's last known position, and we're confident we'll locate the plane quickly." But they didn't locate it quickly. The first day of searching found nothing. The second day found nothing. By the end of the first week, more than 30 aircraft and hundreds of volunteers had scoured thousands of square miles of Oregon and Washington wilderness without finding any trace of Cascade 77 Alpha. It was as if Adam Wilson and his aircraft had simply vanished from existence. "I don't understand," Sarah said to Inspector Crawford during a briefing at the end of the second week. "How does a twin-engine aircraft just disappear? Don't these planes have emergency beacons, GPS tracking?" Crawford's expression was carefully neutral. "Mrs. Wilson, we've discovered some irregularities in your husband's flight that we're still investigating." "What kind of irregularities?" "The cargo manifest for his flight lists medical equipment being delivered to a client in Bozeman. But when we contacted the supposed recipient, we found that no such person exists at the address provided. The entire delivery was apparently fraudulent." Sarah felt the room spinning around her. "Are you saying someone hired Adam under false pretenses?" "We're saying that someone paid Cascade Air Freight $36,000 to get your husband and his aircraft to a specific location at a specific time. The question is why?" Inspector Crawford opened a folder and pulled out several documents. "We've also discovered that your husband's aircraft was carrying some unusual cargo. A sealed metal case with very specific handling instructions. The shipper used a false name and a post office box that doesn't exist. What was in the case? We don't know. The shipping documents were falsified, and the payment was made through a series of shell companies that we haven't been able to trace." "But Mrs. Wilson," Crawford paused, her expression growing more serious, "we have reason to believe that your husband may have discovered something about this cargo, and that his disappearance may not have been accidental." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "You think someone killed my husband? We think someone may have forced his aircraft down. The question is whether your husband survived the landing." 3 weeks into the search, the Civil Air Patrol announced that they were scaling back operations. With no wreckage found, no emergency beacon signals detected, and no credible sightings, the official search was being suspended pending new evidence. Sarah refused to give up. She hired a private investigator, posted rewards for information, and spent her life savings on private search flights. But month after month, the result was the same: nothing. Adam Wilson had vanished as completely as if he'd never existed. But someone had made a critical mistake. In their rush to eliminate Adam and his aircraft, they had forgotten about technology that hadn't existed during previous operations. Technology that would eventually expose the truth about what happened in those mountains. Technology that was quietly uploading data to a server in Portland, waiting for someone to discover it. 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days after Captain Adam Wilson disappeared, a commercial fishing boat named the Second Chance was working the waters off the Oregon coast when their nets brought up something that would change everything. Captain Mike Torino had been fishing these waters for 37 years, and he'd seen nets bring up everything from old car tires to unexploded World War II ordnance. But he'd never seen anything like the twisted piece of aluminum that was tangled in his nets on the morning of February 8, 2025. "Joey, come look at this," Mike called to his first mate. The metal fragment was about 3 feet long and clearly machined, not natural debris or typical ocean junk. But what caught Mike's attention was the faded lettering still visible on one edge. N771CA, an aircraft registration number. "Looks like part of a plane," Joey said, helping to untangle the debris from the net. "Should we call the Coast Guard?" "Yeah, but let's see if there's anything else first." They lowered the nets again, and within an hour, they had pulled up more aircraft debris, pieces of cabin interior, fragments of instruments, and most significantly, a partially crushed metal box about the size of a briefcase. Mike called the Coast Guard, who immediately dispatched a cutter to the Second Chance's position. By evening, the debris was in the hands of NTSB investigators, who confirmed what Mike had suspected. They had found the first traces of Cascade 77 Alpha, but they had found something else too. The metal briefcase, despite being damaged by 3 years underwater, still contained its contents. When NTSB investigators carefully opened the case under controlled conditions, they discovered something that made them immediately contact the FBI. Inside the case were 64 small sealed vials containing what appeared to be biological samples. Each vial was labeled with codes that meant nothing to the aircraft investigators, but everything to the FBI's bioterrorism unit. "We need to find the rest of this aircraft," FBI Special Agent Patricia Hayes told the emergency briefing at the NTSB facility, "and we need to find it immediately." "Agent Hayes," said NTSB investigator Tom Richardson, "we're dealing with an aircraft that's been missing for over 3 years. Even if we locate the main wreckage, the chances of finding intact evidence are—" "You don't understand," Hayes interrupted. "Those vials contained samples of hemorrhagic fever viruses, Ebola, Marburg, and several strains we haven't been able to identify yet. Someone was transporting weaponized biological agents, and now we have no idea where the rest of them are." The fake room fell silent as the implications sank in. "How many vials were originally in the case?" Richardson asked. Hayes consulted her notes. "According to the manufacturer's specifications for this type of containment system, the case was designed to hold 200 individual vials. We recovered 64. That means 136 vials of potentially weaponized biological agents are still missing. And they've been missing for 3 years, added Coast Guard Captain Jennifer Walsh. They could be anywhere by now. But Agent Hayes had a different theory. She'd spent the past 2 days reviewing the original case file on Adam Wilson's disappearance, and several things didn't add up. "I don't think this was a simple hijacking or theft," she told the assembled investigators. Captain Wilson was an experienced pilot with military training. If someone was trying to steal biological weapons from his aircraft, why is the cargo case in the ocean? Why wasn't it recovered by whoever took the plane? Richardson frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that Captain Wilson figured out what he was carrying, and he deliberately crashed his aircraft to prevent those biological weapons from reaching their destination. The question is, did he survive the crash?" The search for the main wreckage began immediately, but this time it was a massive operation involving the Navy, Coast Guard, and specialized deep-sea recovery teams. Using the location where the debris was found, oceanographers calculated possible drift patterns and began mapping search grids across hundreds of square miles of ocean floor. It took 6 weeks to find the main wreckage. The Cessna 404 was located in 340 feet of water, approximately 12 miles off the Oregon coast. The aircraft had clearly impacted the water at high speed. The fuselage was heavily damaged, and both engines had been torn from their mounts. But crucially, the aircraft was largely intact, and the cockpit section, where the black box would be located, was still sealed. "We're going down to recover the flight data recorder," Dive Team Leader Commander Sarah Martinez told the assembled investigators. "But I want everyone to understand that this is an extremely hazardous operation. The aircraft is sitting on an unstable ledge 340 feet down. We get one shot at this. The dive took place on March 28, 2025. Using a sophisticated ROV, remotely operated vehicle, the recovery team carefully extracted both the official flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder from the wreckage. But they found something else in the cockpit debris. Tangled in the remains of Adam Wilson's flight bag was a small electronic device that none of the investigators recognized. It was about the size of a smartphone, heavily damaged by water and impact, but clearly not standard aircraft equipment. "What is that?" Agent Hayes asked as the device was carefully placed in a sealed evidence container. "I don't know, Commander," Martinez replied, "but it was definitely personal equipment belonging to the pilot, and it looks like it might have been recording something." 3 days later, FBI forensic specialists managed to extract data from Adam Wilson's personal flight recorder. What they found would rewrite the entire investigation and expose a conspiracy that had been decades in the making. But first, they had to find someone who could explain how a commercial cargo pilot had obtained military-grade recording equipment. That wasn't supposed to exist. FBI digital forensics specialist Dr. Elena Vasquez had worked on hundreds of data recovery cases, but she'd never seen anything like Adam Wilson's personal flight recorder. The device was far more sophisticated than anything available to civilian pilots. It contained military-grade encryption, satellite uplink capabilities, and storage capacity that far exceeded standard commercial equipment. "Agent Hayes," Dr. Vasquez said as she completed her initial analysis, "this device was designed for intelligence operations. Where did a cargo pilot get something like this?" Agent Hayes had been wondering the same thing. After 3 days of investigating Adam Wilson's background, she'd discovered that his military service record contained several classified sections that required special clearance to access. "I'm starting to think Captain Wilson wasn't just a cargo pilot," Hayes replied. "His military records show he flew classified missions in Afghanistan, but the details are sealed. I've requested access, but it could take weeks." "Well, I have good news and bad news about the data recovery," Dr. Vasquez said, pulling up files on her computer. "The good news is that the device's memory core survived the water damage. The bad news is that most of the data is heavily encrypted, but I was able to recover about 40 minutes of cockpit audio from the day of the incident." Hayes leaned forward. "Let's hear it." What they heard in the next 40 minutes would change everything they thought they knew about Adam Wilson's disappearance. The recording began with routine flight operations, engine start, taxi, takeoff, and normal air traffic control communications. But about 2 hours into the flight, Adam's voice took on a concerned tone as he described navigation discrepancies and the appearance of an unidentified aircraft. "This is incredible," Hayes whispered as they listened to Adam's description of the black military jet. He was being intercepted by an unidentified aircraft, and no one on the ground had any idea. But the most shocking revelation came during the final minutes of the recording. As Adam described the 3 aircraft forcing him down, he made a statement that made Hayes stop the playback and replay it twice. "The cargo is in a sealed metal case, approximately 2 feet by 1 foot by 6 inches. It's been making electronic noises and has some kind of sophisticated tracking device." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her computer. "Agent Hayes, the case we recovered from the ocean floor matches that exact description. But here's the thing. Our analysis shows that the case was designed to look like it contained biological weapons. But the actual contents were decoys. Decoy. The vials contained harmless bacterial cultures designed to mimic the appearance and behavior of actual biological weapons. Someone wanted people to think they were stealing deadly viruses, but they were really stealing fakes." Hayes felt pieces of a puzzle beginning to click into place. So whoever hired Adam to transport this cargo was running some kind of sting operation. They were trying to catch someone who was attempting to acquire biological weapons. That would explain the sophisticated tracking equipment and the specific delivery instructions, Dr. Vasquez agreed. But it doesn't explain who the people in the black aircraft were, or why they killed Captain Wilson instead of just taking the cargo. Hayes was quiet for a moment, thinking through the implications. Unless the people in the black aircraft weren't the targets of the sting operation, what if they were the ones running it? "You think this was a government operation that went wrong?" I think this was a government operation that went exactly as planned, Hayes replied grimly. Except for one thing they didn't account for. Adam Wilson was recording everything. The next phase of the investigation would require resources and clearances that were far beyond what the FBI normally used for aircraft accident investigations. Hayes knew she was stepping into dangerous territory, but the evidence was pointing toward a conspiracy that involved federal agencies and possibly international intelligence operations. She also knew that someone had killed Adam Wilson to protect that conspiracy, and they had nearly gotten away with it. But there was one more piece of evidence that Dr. Vasquez had discovered in the personal flight recorder. Evidence that would expose the entire operation and reveal who was really responsible for Adam Wilson's death. Agent Hayes, Dr. Vasquez said quietly, there's something else on this recording that you need to hear. It's from about 6 months before the incident. Captain Wilson was apparently investigating something, and he recorded several conversations with people at Cascade Air Freight. What kind of conversation? Conversations about cargo shipments that didn't appear on official manifests. Conversations about flights to locations that don't exist on any airport database. And conversations with someone who was coordinating these operations from inside the company. Dr. Vasquez played a brief excerpt from one of the recordings. Adam's voice was cautious but determined as he spoke to an unidentified person. I know. You're involved in something that's not legal air freight operations. I've tracked 7 flights in the past 3 months that don't match any legitimate cargo requirements. Either you explain what's really going on, or I take this information to the FAA. The other voice was harder to make out, but the response was chilling. Captain Wilson, you're asking questions about things that are far above your clearance level. I strongly suggest you focus on flying your assigned routes and forget about cargo that doesn't concern you. Everything that goes through my aircraft concerns me, Adam replied firmly. And if you're using Cascade Air Freight for illegal operations, I'm going to stop it. The recording ended there, but the implications were clear. Adam Wilson had discovered that his employer was being used for illegal operations, and he had been investigating them for months before his disappearance. Someone at Cascade Air Freight had been running a conspiracy that involved fake biological weapons, military aircraft, and the murder of anyone who got too close to the truth. But Adam Wilson had been smart enough to gather evidence before confronting them, evidence that had been uploading to secure servers for months, creating a digital trail that would eventually expose everyone involved. Hayes realized she wasn't just investigating an aircraft accident anymore. She was investigating a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government and international intelligence operations, and the people responsible had no idea that Adam Wilson's evidence was about to destroy them. The breakthrough came when FBI cybercrime specialist Agent David Chen discovered that Adam Wilson's personal flight recorder had been automatically uploading encrypted data to a secure server for over a year before his disappearance. The server was registered to a private intelligence firm called Meridian Solutions, a company that officially didn't exist. This is bigger than we thought, Agent Hayes said as she reviewed Chen's findings. Meridian Solutions is a front company for a joint CIA-NSA operation called Project Blackbird. They've been using private air freight companies to transport intelligence assets and run sting operations against international arms dealers. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her computer terminal. Agent Hayes, I've been analyzing the upload patterns from Wilson's device. He wasn't just recording his own flights. He was documenting a pattern of illegal operations that had been going on for at least 2 years. The evidence painted a disturbing picture. Cascade Air Freight had been infiltrated by intelligence, operatives who were using the company's legitimate cargo flights as cover for classified operations. Adam Wilson had stumbled onto this arrangement when he noticed that certain cargo shipments didn't match standard manifests, and that some flights were being directed to locations that weren't on any official airport database. But the most shocking discovery came when Chen cracked the encryption on Wilson's older recordings. Listen to this, Chen said, playing an audio file dated 6 weeks before Wilson's disappearance. The recording was clearly made during a confrontation. At Cascade Air Freight, Adam's voice was angry but controlled. I've documented 14 flights that violate federal aviation regulations, cargo that isn't properly manifested, destinations that don't exist, and payment through shell companies that can't be traced. Someone is using this company for illegal operations. An unfamiliar voice responded. Captain Wilson, you're interfering with matters of national security. These operations have been approved at the highest levels of government. Approved by who? Adam demanded. Show me the documentation. Show me the legal authority for using a civilian air freight company to transport undeclared cargo to unauthorized destinations. That information is classified. Then I'm taking this to the FAA, Adam said firmly, and to the FBI, and to anyone else who will listen. There was a long pause before the other voice spoke again, and this time the tone was unmistakably threatening. Captain Wilson, you have a wife and a comfortable life. I strongly suggest you consider whether your curiosity is worth risking everything you care about. The recording ended there, but Agent Hayes had heard enough. We need to find out who that voice belongs to, she told Chen. And we need to find out fast, because I have a feeling Adam Wilson's life wasn't the only one in danger. The voice identification took 3 days, but when the results came back, they confirmed Hayes' worst fear. The voice belonged to Deputy Director Marcus Vaughn of the CIA's Directorate of Operations, one of the most powerful intelligence officials in the United States government. This goes all the way to the top, Hayes told her supervisor, FBI Assistant Director Robert Martinez. We're not just dealing with a rogue operation. We're dealing with a systematic conspiracy that involves multiple federal agencies. Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Patricia, do you understand what you're telling me? You're saying that the CIA murdered an American citizen to cover up an illegal intelligence operation. I'm saying that someone murdered Adam Wilson, and the evidence points to a conspiracy involving the highest levels of the intelligence community, Hayes replied. The question is, what are we going to do about it? But before Martinez could answer, Chen burst into the office with a laptop computer and an expression of barely controlled excitement. Agent Hayes, you need to see this immediately, Chen said, setting up his computer. I found something in Wilson's data that changes everything. He wasn't just investigating Cascade Air Freight. He was working with someone inside the intelligence community who was trying to expose the entire operation. On Chen's screen was a series of encrypted messages between Adam Wilson and someone, identified only as Sparrow. The messages revealed that Wilson had been recruited by a whistleblower inside the CIA who was attempting to gather evidence of illegal operations being conducted under the cover of Project Blackbird. According to these messages, Chen continued, the biological weapons cargo was a test. Sparrow was trying to prove that the Project Blackbird operatives were willing to steal and sell actual weapons of mass destruction to international buyers. So, the cargo wasn't meant to be delivered to Montana, Hayes said, understanding dawning. It was meant to be intercepted. Exactly. But something went wrong. Instead of capturing the Project Blackbird operatives in the act of stealing biological weapons, they decided to eliminate Wilson and anyone else who knew about the operation. Agent Hayes felt sick as she realized the implication. They murdered Adam Wilson because he was helping to expose their crimes, and they've been covering it up for 3 years. But the story wasn't over. Chen had found one final message from Sparrow, sent just hours before Wilson's final flight. Adam, they know. Abort the mission and get out now. They're planning to eliminate you during the cargo pickup. Whatever you do, don't fly that route. Wilson never got that message, Hayes said quietly. He was already in the air. There's more, Chen said. Sparrow included an insurance policy in case something happened to Wilson. A complete list of Project Blackbird operations, financial records, and the identities of everyone involved. Agent Hayes looked at the screen, seeing dozens of names, dates, and operations that represented years of illegal intelligence activities. At the top of the list was Deputy Director Marcus Vaughn, but he wasn't alone. The conspiracy included officials from the CIA, NSA, Defense Intelligence Agency, and several private military contractors. How many people are we talking about? Martinez asked. 43 individuals in positions of significant authority, Chen replied, including 2 sitting members of Congress who were briefed on the operations and approved the funding through black budget appropriation. The room was silent as the magnitude of the conspiracy sank in. They weren't just investigating the murder of one pilot. They were looking at a systematic corruption of the intelligence community that had been operating for years. Agent Hayes, Martinez said finally, I want you to prepare arrest warrants for everyone on that list. We're going to need coordination with the Justice Department, the Inspector General's office, and probably the White House. This is going to be the biggest intelligence scandal in US history. But as Hayes prepared to leave Martinez's office, Chen stopped her with one final revelation. Agent Hayes, there's something else. According to Sparrow's files, Adam Wilson isn't the first person they've killed to protect this operation. Over the past 5 years, at least 12 people who discovered or threatened to expose Project Blackbird have died in suspicious circumstances. Plane crashes, car accidents, apparent suicides, all made to look like accidents or natural causes. Hayes felt her blood run cold. We're dealing with serial killers who have the resources of the federal government behind them. And, Chen added quietly, according to the last message in Wilson's files, Sparrow was planning to go public with everything the day after Wilson's flight. What happened to Sparrow? Chen pulled up a newspaper article on his screen. The headline read, CIA analyst dies in apparent suicide. The article was dated October 24, 2021. One day after Adam Wilson's disappearance, Agent Hayes realized that she was now holding evidence that could bring down dozens of high-ranking government officials and expose a conspiracy that had resulted in the deaths of at least 13 people. She also realized that the people responsible for those deaths knew that the evidence existed, and they would stop at nothing to prevent it from seeing the light of day. The investigation was about to become very dangerous for everyone involved. Within hours of Agent Hayes' discovery, the FBI task force investigating Adam Wilson's death found themselves under intense pressure from multiple federal agencies. Phone calls were made from the highest levels of government. Classified briefings were suddenly rescheduled, and several key pieces of evidence were mysteriously reclassified as national security secrets. But Hayes had anticipated this response. Before sharing the full scope of their discoveries with FBI leadership, she had made copies of all the critical evidence and distributed them to trusted contacts in Congress, the Justice Department Inspector General's office, and several investigative journalists. The conspiracy was too big to suppress, and too many people now knew the truth. Agent Hayes, Assistant Director Martinez said during an emergency briefing, I've received direct orders from the Deputy Attorney General to suspend this investigation pending a national security review. On what grounds? Hayes demanded. On the grounds that pursuing this case could compromise ongoing intelligence operations and endanger American assets overseas. Hayes had expected this, but it still made her furious. Sir, we have evidence of multiple murders committed by government officials. Are you ordering me to ignore that evidence? Martinez looked uncomfortable. I'm ordering you to turn over all materials related to Project Blackbird to the appropriate intelligence oversight committees. They'll determine how to proceed without compromising national security. The same oversight committees that approved the illegal operations in the first place. Before Martinez could respond, Agent Chen burst into the briefing room with a laptop and an expression of barely controlled excitement. Agent Hayes, you need to see this. The story just broke. On Chen's screen was a Washington Post article with the headline, Leaked Documents Reveal CIA Murder Conspiracy. The article, written by investigative journalist Rebecca Morrison, contained detailed information about Project Blackbird, the murder of Adam Wilson, and the systematic elimination of whistleblowers who had threatened to expose the operation. How did Morrison get this information? Martinez demanded. Hayes allowed herself a small smile. I may have shared some information with her, purely in the interest of ensuring that the truth comes to light. Martinez's face went pale. Agent Hayes, you've just destroyed your career and possibly violated federal law by leaking classified information. Sir, with respect, the information I shared wasn't classified. It was evidence of crimes committed by government officials. And I'm pretty sure the American people have a right to know when their intelligence agencies are murdering citizens. Within an hour, the Washington Post article had been picked up by every major news organization in the country. By evening, it was the lead story on every network news program, and social media was exploding with demands for congressional investigation. The conspiracy that had killed Adam Wilson and at least 12 other people was finally being exposed to the light of day, but the conspirators weren't going to go down without a fight. At 11:47 p.m. that same evening, Agent Hayes received a phone call at her home that chilled her to the bone. "Agent Hayes," said a calm, professional voice that she didn't recognize. "You've made a serious mistake by going public with classified information." "Who is this?" "Someone who understands that certain secrets must be protected for the greater good. You have 48 hours to retract your statements and convince your journalist friend to withdraw her article. If you don't, you'll discover that airplane." Accidents aren't the only way that people can disappear. The line went dead. Hayes immediately called FBI security and requested protective custody. But she knew that the people making threats against her had resources that went far beyond what the FBI could protect against. She also knew that retracting her statements wasn't an option. Too many people had died already, and Adam Wilson's family deserved justice. The next morning brought more revelations as additional whistleblowers, emboldened by the public exposure, began coming forward with their own evidence of Project Blackbird operations. A former NSA analyst provided documents showing that the agency had been monitoring and targeting American citizens who posed threats to the conspiracy. A retired Air Force colonel revealed that military aircraft had been used in several of the suspicious deaths, including Adam Wilson. Most significantly, a current CIA operative identifying himself only as Deep Blue contacted journalist Rebecca Morrison with an offer to provide complete documentation of every Project Blackbird operation, including video evidence of planning meetings where the murders of whistleblowers were discussed and approved. "They're panicking," Agent Chen told Hayes, as they watched congressional leaders calling for immediate investigations. "The conspiracy is falling apart and they're making mistakes." But Hayes wasn't celebrating yet. "The most dangerous part is, just beginning. These people have killed 13 innocent Americans to protect their secrets. They're not going to let us expose them without a fight." Her concerns proved justified when, at 3:17 a.m. on the second day after the story broke, someone attempted to break into her apartment. Hayes was awake and armed, and the intruders fled when she called for backup, but the message was clear. The conspirators were willing to use violence to protect themselves. The attempted break-in was the mistake that finally brought down the entire conspiracy. FBI forensics teams found fingerprints and DNA evidence at Hayes' apartment that belonged to operatives from a private military contractor called Blackwater Solutions, a company that had been receiving classified contracts from the CIA for overseas operations. More importantly, surveillance cameras in Hayes' apartment building captured clear images of the intruders, including their license plates and facial recognition data that allowed the FBI to identify them within hours. When the Blackwater operatives were arrested, they immediately began cooperating with investigators in exchange for reduced sentences. Their testimony revealed the full scope of the conspiracy and provided direct evidence linking Deputy Director Marcus Vaughn and 16 other high-ranking officials to the murders of Adam Wilson and the other whistleblowers. "It's over, Agent," Chen told Hayes as they watched the news coverage of mass arrests being made across Washington, D.C. "We got them all." But Hayes was thinking about Adam Wilson's wife Sarah, who had spent 3 years not knowing what had happened to her husband. She was thinking about the families of the other victims who had been told their loved ones died in accidents or committed suicide. "No," Hayes said quietly. "It's just beginning. Now we have to prove everything in court and make sure that the people responsible pay for what they've done." The trials would take 2 years, and the revelations would shake the American intelligence community to its core. But the most important outcome was that Adam Wilson's family finally learned the truth about what happened to him and why he died. Captain Adam Wilson hadn't just been a cargo pilot. He had been a hero who sacrificed his life to expose a conspiracy that threatened the very foundations of American democracy. The trial of Deputy Director Marcus Vaughn and his co-conspirators began 18 months after the arrests, and it became the most closely watched espionage case in American history. The prosecution, led by Special Prosecutor Amanda Chen, no relation to FBI agent David Chen, presented evidence that was so damning and comprehensive that several defendants changed their pleas to guilty before the trial even reached its halfway point. Sarah Wilson sat in the front row of the federal courthouse every day, finally learning the complete truth about what had happened to her husband. The evidence presented during the trial painted a picture of Adam as a man who had discovered a massive conspiracy and had risked everything to expose it. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Prosecutor Chen said during her opening statement, "Captain, Adam Wilson was murdered because he refused to be silent about crimes being committed by his own government. He was killed because he believed that the American people deserved to know the truth about illegal operations being conducted in their name." The most dramatic moment of the trial came when the jury heard Adam's final recording from his personal flight recorder. The courtroom was completely silent as his voice filled the room, describing the black aircraft, the jamming of his communications, and his decision to crash his plane rather than allow the cargo to be captured. "Tell my wife Sarah that I love her," Adam's voice said through the speakers. "And tell the FAA that Cascade Air Freight has been compromised." Sarah Wilson wept openly as she heard her husband's final words. But they were tears of pride as well, as Adam had died a hero, and now the whole world knew it. The prosecution's case was strengthened by testimony from Deep Blue, the CIA whistleblower who had provided crucial evidence about Project Blackbird. Deep Blue turned out to be CIA analyst Jennifer Torres, a 15-year veteran of the intelligence community who had been investigating the illegal operations for 2 years before Adam Wilson's death. "I tried to warn Captain Wilson," Torres testified, her voice barely above a whisper. "I sent him a message telling him to abort the mission, but it was too late. He was already in the air." Torres's testimony revealed that she had been Sparrow, Adam Wilson's contact inside the CIA, and that her apparent suicide in 2021 had actually been a staged death designed to allow her to go underground and gather evidence against the conspiracy. "I've spent the past 3 years living in fear," Torres said, knowing that the people who killed Captain Wilson and 12 other innocent Americans were still in positions of power. "I'm testifying today because those people need to face justice, and because Captain Wilson's sacrifice can't be allowed to be in vain." The defense attorneys tried to argue that Project Blackbird was a legitimate intelligence operation and that the deaths of the whistleblowers were unfortunate accidents, but the evidence against their clients was overwhelming. Phone records showed that Deputy Director Vaughn had personally ordered the interception of Adam Wilson's aircraft. Financial records revealed payments to Blackwater Solutions for problem elimination service. Most damning of all, surveillance videos from CIA headquarters showed planning meetings where the murders were discussed and approved by multiple high-ranking officials. "The defendants want you to believe that they were protecting national security," Prosecutor Chen told the jury during closing argument. But what they were really protecting was their own criminal enterprise. They murdered 13 American citizens to cover up their crimes, and they would have murdered more if Captain Wilson's evidence hadn't exposed them. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges against all defendants. Deputy Director Marcus Vaughn was sentenced to life in prison without parole for conspiracy to commit murder and treason. 16 other officials received sentences ranging from 25 years to life. But the most important outcome of the trial wasn't the convictions. It was the complete vindication of Adam Wilson's actions and the exposure of a conspiracy that had corrupted the American intelligence community for years. "My husband died because he believed in truth and justice," Sarah Wilson said in a statement after the verdicts were announced. "He gave his life to protect the American people from criminals who had infiltrated their own government. I'm proud of him, and I'm grateful that the truth has finally come to light." The trial also led to massive reforms in intelligence oversight and the creation of new protections for whistleblowers who report illegal activities by government agents. The Adam Wilson Act, passed by Congress 6 months after the trial ended, established independent oversight of all intelligence operations and created legal protections for anyone who reports crimes committed by federal agencies. But perhaps the most fitting tribute to Adam Wilson came from an unexpected source. The Civil Air Patrol, which had led the original search for his missing aircraft, established the Captain Adam Wilson Award for Aviation Safety, recognizing pilots who demonstrate exceptional courage and integrity in the face of danger. The first recipient of the award was Jenny Martinez, the ground operations supervisor at Cascade Air Freight, who had tried to warn Adam about the suspicious cargo before his final flight. "Captain Wilson showed us what it means to be a true pilot," Martinez said during the award ceremony. "He wasn't just responsible for flying his aircraft safely. He was responsible for making sure that his aircraft wasn't used for evil purposes. He paid the ultimate price for that responsibility, but his sacrifice saved countless lives." 3 years after the trial ended, Sarah Wilson remarried and started a foundation dedicated to supporting the families of whistleblowers who had been killed or persecuted for exposing government crimes. The Adam Wilson Foundation had helped more than 200 families and had become a powerful advocate for transparency and accountability in government. But Sarah never forgot the man who had died to expose the truth or the courage he had shown in his final moments. Every year on October 23rd, the anniversary of Adam's disappearance, Sarah would visit the memorial that had been erected at Portland International Airport in honor of her husband and the other victims of the Project Blackbird conspiracy. The memorial consisted of a simple bronze plaque mounted on a granite stone with the words, "In memory of Captain Adam Wilson and all who gave their lives in service of truth. Their courage reminds us that freedom requires eternal vigilance and that no sacrifice is too great when fighting for justice." Below those words was a quote from Adam's final: "Tell the FAA that Cascade Air Freight has been compromised." It was a simple message, but it had brought down one of the largest criminal conspiracies in American history and ensured that 13 murdered Americans had not died in. The truth, as Adam Wilson had believed, was worth dying for. And in the end, the truth had set them all free. The leg. 5 years after the conviction of the Project Blackbird conspirators, the impact of Adam Wilson's sacrifice continued to reverberate through the American intelligence community and beyond. The reforms implemented in the wake of the scandal had fundamentally changed how intelligence operations were conducted and overseen, and a new generation of intelligence professionals was being trained with an emphasis on ethical conduct and legal compliance. But the most profound change was cultural. The intelligence community, which had traditionally prized secrecy and loyalty above all else, had been forced to confront the reality that those values, taken to extremes, could enable corruption and murder. "What Captain Wilson showed us," said CIA Director Sarah Chen, the former FBI agent David Chen's sister, who had been appointed to clean up the agency after the scandal, "is that true loyalty to your country sometimes means opposing the people who claim to speak for it. His willingness to sacrifice everything for the truth saved our democracy from people who had forgotten what they were supposed to be protecting." The Adam Wilson training program, now mandatory for all intelligence personnel, used case studies from the Project Blackbird conspiracy to teach new agents and analysts how to recognize and report illegal activities within their own agencies. The program's motto, taken from one of Adam's recordings, was simple: "Truth is not the enemy of security. Corruption is." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the forensic specialist who had recovered Adam's recordings, had become one of the leading experts on intelligence community whistleblowing and had testified before Congress dozens of times about the need for stronger protections for those who report government crimes. "Captain Wilson's case showed us that technology can be the ultimate whistleblower," Dr. Vasquez said during a speech at the FBI Academy. His personal flight recorder preserved evidence that exposed 13 murders and prevented countless more. Every intelligence officer should remember that their actions might be recorded and that the truth has a way of surviving even the most sophisticated cover. Rebecca Morrison, the journalist who had broken the original story, won a Pulitzer Prize for her reporting on the Project Blackbird conspiracy. She had written a book about the case called The Last Flight: How One Pilot's Courage Exposed a Government Murder Conspiracy, which became a bestseller and was eventually adapted into a major motion picture. But Morrison always insisted that the real heroes of the story were the people who had risked everything to expose the truth. "Adam Wilson died for his principles," Morrison said during interviews about her. "Jennifer Torres lived underground for 3 years to gather evidence. Agent Patricia Hayes risked her career and her life to investigate the case. These are people who believed that democracy is worth fighting for, even when the fight is against your own government." Agent Hayes had been promoted to Assistant Director of the FBI and had been placed in charge of a new unit dedicated to investigating corruption within federal agencies. Her first major case after the Project Blackbird investigation had exposed a similar conspiracy within the Defense Intelligence Agency, leading to the arrest of 12 more officials and the implementation of additional reforms. Captain Wilson's legacy is that government officials now know they can't get away with murder, Hayes said during a recent interview. They know that somewhere, someone might be recording them. They know that the truth has a way of coming out, no matter how powerful they think they are. Sarah Wilson had never returned to work after her husband's death, instead dedicating herself full-time to the Adam Wilson Foundation and to supporting other families who had lost loved ones to government. The foundation had grown into a major force for transparency and accountability, with chapters in all 50 states and international affiliates in dozens of countries. Adam always said that the most important thing a person could do was to stand up for what's right, even when it's dangerous, Sarah said during the Foundation's 5th anniversary celebration. He proved that one person, armed with the truth, can change the world. That's the lesson I want people to take from his story. But perhaps the most fitting tribute to Adam Wilson came from an unexpected source: the passengers and crew of commercial aircraft around the world, who now flew with the knowledge that their pilots were trained to recognize and report illegal activities, and that the aviation system had been reformed to prevent the kind of infiltration that had made Project Blackbird. Every commercial pilot in America now received training on the Adam Wilson case as part of their certification process, learning about the importance of integrity, the dangers of corruption, and the responsibility that came with being trusted to transport people and cargo safely. Captain Wilson showed us that being a pilot means more than just flying an airplane, said Captain Michelle Rodriguez, an instructor at the American Airlines Flight Training Center. It means being a guardian of the public trust. It means being willing to ask difficult questions about what you're carrying and where you're going. And it means being willing to say no when someone asks you to do something that violates your principles. The Cessna 404 that Adam Wilson had flown on his final mission had been raised from the ocean floor and was now on display at the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum as part of an exhibit about aviation. The display included Adam's personal flight recorder, the biological weapons decoys that had been used as bait, and recordings of his final transition. Visitors to the exhibit could listen to Adam's voice describing the black aircraft, his decision to crash rather than allow the cargo to be captured, and his final message of love to his wife. Many visitors left the exhibit in tears, moved by the courage of a man who had chosen to die rather than be complicit in a conspiracy. But the most powerful part of the exhibit was the final display, a simple placard with a quote from Adam's last recording and a challenge to every visitor. Captain Wilson died because he believed that truth is more important than personal safety, that integrity is more important than career advancement, and that standing up to corruption is every citizen's duty. His question to each of us is simple. When faced with a choice between doing what's safe and doing what's right, what will you choose? 5 years after his death, Captain Adam Wilson's influence continued to. His story had been taught in law schools, military academies, and intelligence training programs around the world. His name had become synonymous with courage, integrity, and the belief that no conspiracy is too powerful to be exposed by a determined individual armed with the truth. But Adam Wilson's greatest legacy wasn't the reforms he had inspired or the criminals he had helped expose. His greatest legacy was the example he had set, that ordinary people, faced with extraordinary circumstances, could choose to be heroes. And in a world where corruption and conspiracy often seemed overwhelming, that example gave people hope that the truth would always find a way to survive, and that justice, however delayed, would eventually. The black box had revealed the shocking truth about Captain Adam Wilson's disappearance. But more than that, it had revealed the shocking truth about what one person could accomplish when they refused to be silent about the crimes being committed in their name. It was a truth worth remembering and a legacy worth honoring forever.